Centuries ago, beneath the shadow of crumbling temples and whispering stars, a prophecy was carved into stone, a warning of fire and rebirth, of empires rising and falling like tides. The words spoke of a time when the world would tremble, when gods and mortals would collide in a dance of destiny. Whoever inscribed those words vanished into history, but the prophecy remained, echoing through time like a riddle waiting to be solved. This wasn't just one forgotten prediction, it was part of something far larger, a tapestry of ancient voices spanning continents and cultures, all whispering secrets about the fate of humanity. From the oracle temples of Delphi to the cryptic scrolls of the Mayans, from the thunderous visions of Norse seers to the dreamlike poems of Hindu sages, civilizations across the globe shared one unnerving trait. They all believed the future was written in the stars, etched into the earth, or spoken by the divine. These weren't just stories, they were urgent messages, warnings, and promises left behind like breadcrumbs for those daring enough to follow. And today, we're gathering 35 of the most haunting, miraculous, and world-shaking prophecies ever recorded. Some came true with terrifying precision, others remain mysteries, their meaning still hidden in symbols and shadows. What if these prophecies weren't just folklore or coincidence? What if they were glimpses into a deeper truth, a pattern woven into the fabric of time itself? Picture standing at the edge of an ancient ruin, holding a fragment of text that predicts the unimaginable. That's the journey we're beginning today. Together, we'll decipher riddles carved by long-lost hands, uncover predictions that defied logic, and ask the spine-tingling question: did these seers truly see the future, or were they tapping into something even stranger? The answers might change how you see history and perhaps the world yet to come. So take a step closer. The past is watching, and it has something to tell you. High on the slopes of Mount Parnassus, where the air hummed with the scent of laurel and burning incense, the Oracle of Delphi sat at the very heart of the ancient world's mysteries. Pilgrims, kings, and warriors journeyed for days, sometimes years, to stand before her, desperate for a glimpse of the future, but the answers they received were never straightforward. The oracle, a woman chosen as the vessel of the god Apollo, would breathe in vapors rising from a crack in the earth, slip into a trance, and speak in riddles that echoed through the temple's stone halls. One of her most chilling prophecies came just before the Persians invaded Greece. When King Croesus asked if he should wage war, the oracle replied, "If you cross the river Halys, you will destroy a great empire." Confident in his might, Croesus marched forth only to watch his own kingdom crumble. The prophecy was true, but not in the way he expected. What made the oracle's words so uncanny? She never lied, but she also never spoke plainly. Her predictions twisted like snakes in the grass, forcing rulers to gamble on interpretations. Before the Battle of Salamis, Athens begged for guidance and received this cryptic warning: "Only the wooden wall will save you." Some generals took it literally, barricading behind palisades, but Themistocles saw deeper. The wooden wall meant their ships. His fleet crushed the Persians, changing history. The rituals behind these prophecies were just as fascinating. The oracle, known as the Pythia, prepared by bathing in sacred springs, chewing laurel leaves, and sacrificing goats to test the god's favor. If the flames burned bright, the omens were good. Then, seated on a bronze tripod above the earth's fissure, she'd enter a state of divine madness. Scholars still debate whether those vapors were natural gases or something more otherworldly. Even the temple's ruins whisper of power. Inscribed above its entrance were two commands: "Know thyself" and "Nothing in excess." Simple words, yet they held the key to unraveling the oracle's wisdom. Perhaps her messages weren't just about the future, but about the folly of those who asked. For every correct interpretation, there were dozens who misread her words at their peril. The oracle didn't just predict fate, she revealed how blind ambition could become its own undoing. The story of King Croesus and his fateful encounter with the Oracle of Delphi is a masterclass in how the gods seem to toy with mortal certainty. Known as the wealthiest man of his time, Croesus ruled Lydia with a golden touch, literally. His riches were legendary, his armies formidable, yet none of it could shield him from the razor's edge of prophecy. When he sent messengers to Delphi, laden with gifts of silver and gold to secure the oracle's favor, his question was simple: should I wage war against Persia? The reply he received would echo through history. If you cross the river Halys, a great empire will be destroyed. To Croesus, it sounded like victory. The gods, it seemed, had blessed his campaign, but prophecies have a way of revealing their truths in the cruelest of twists. Crossing the Halys River, Croesus marched confidently into battle, only to watch his own empire crumble beneath the might of Cyrus the Great. The great empire destined to fall wasn't Persia at all. It was his own. The irony was brutal, the lesson unforgettable. The oracle's words were never a guarantee, but a test of wisdom. Croesus had heard what he wanted to hear, and it cost him everything. The aftermath reshaped the ancient world. Persia's victory sent shockwaves through Greece, proving that no amount of gold could defy fate. And yet, the story doesn't end in total ruin. Legend says Cyrus, impressed by Croesus's dignity in defeat, spared his life. Some even claim the fallen king became an advisor, whispering hard-won lessons about hubris to the very man who conquered him. The Greeks, watching from afar, internalized the warning. Delphi's reputation as a conduit of divine truth grew stronger, but so did the understanding that prophecy demanded humility. What makes this moment so chilling isn't just the precision of the prediction. It's the way it exposes humanity's oldest weakness. We bend ambiguity to fit our desires, interpreting signs to match our hopes rather than heeding their warnings. The oracle didn't lie, she simply let Croesus deceive himself. Centuries later, historians still parse her words, wondering, was this a divine jest or a mercy, a chance for Croesus to turn back if only he'd listened more carefully? One thing is certain, the fall of Lydia became a cautionary tale etched into Greek consciousness, a reminder that the future is a mirror, reflecting not just what will be, but what we choose to see. While Delphi's riddles echoed through Greece, another set of prophecies wielded immense power, this time in the heart of Rome. The Sibylline Books were no ordinary scrolls. Locked away in the Temple of Jupiter, guarded by a special priesthood, these ancient texts were Rome's secret weapon against disaster. Legend claims they were sold to King Tarquin the Proud by a mysterious old woman, the Sibyl of Cumæa, who burned 3 of the original 9 books each time he refused her price until he finally paid the full sum for the remaining fragments. Whether myth or history, one thing was certain. When plague, famine, or invasion threatened, Rome's leaders would turn to these cryptic verses as their ultimate guide. The books weren't read like ordinary texts. Instead, specially appointed priests called the quindecimviri would decipher them only when directed by the Senate, often during moments of panic. After a series of unnatural omens like statues sweating blood or wolves roaming the forum, the priests would scour the prophecies for solutions. Their prescriptions were bizarre yet precise: parade a sacrificed bull through the streets, introduce a new god to the pantheon, or build a temple to an obscure deity. And time after time, Rome followed these instructions to the letter, believing its survival depended on it. One of the most famous interventions came during the Punic Wars, when Hannibal's army brought Rome to its knees. The Sibylline Books advised bringing the cult of Cybele, the Great Mother, from Anatolia to protect the city. A sacred black stone was transported with immense ceremony and installed in the Temple of Victory. Soon after, Hannibal's advance stalled. Coincidence? To the Romans, it was divine confirmation. But the books weren't just about averting disaster, they shaped Rome's identity. When Augustus became emperor, he moved them to a new temple beneath Apollo's statue, tying his reign to prophecy's authority. Generals consulted them before battles, senators whispered about their contents during political crises. Even as Christianity rose, emperors couldn't resist their pull. Constantine reportedly used them to justify his conversion, claiming they'd foreseen Christ's triumph. Yet the original Sibylline books vanished in the chaos of Rome's decline, burned, some say, by a general who feared their power. Copies surfaced over centuries, but none carried the same weight. What makes their legacy so haunting isn't just their accuracy, but how they reveal a universal truth. Civilizations crave certainty. Rome, for all its roads and legions, still knelt before the whispers of an ancient seer. The real prophecy may have been this: no empire, no matter how mighty, can outrun its hunger for answers. Deep in the roots of Yggdrasil, the great world tree of Norse mythology, three shadowy figures carved destiny into the bark with knives of bone. The Norns Urd, Verdandi, and Skuld were more than mere weavers of fate. They were the architects of existence itself, spinning the threads of past, present, and future into a tapestry no god or mortal could escape. Their prophecies weren't just predictions, they were unbreakable laws whispered into the ears of gods and kings alike. And none of their visions loomed larger than Ragnarök, the doom of the gods, a cataclysm so precise in its details that it felt less like myth and more like a countdown. The Vikings didn't fear death, they feared dying without glory, but Ragnarök was different. It wasn't just an end, it was a reckoning foretold with eerie specificity. The Norns spoke of winters that would never relent, of the sun and moon swallowed by wolves, of the earth shaking loose from its foundations as the monstrous wolf Fenris broke free. Odin himself, the Allfather, had sought knowledge of this fate, sacrificing an eye at the well of Urd just to glimpse the Norns' designs. Yet even his wisdom couldn't change what was written. What's chilling about these prophecies is how they mirror real-world fears. The Norse lived in a land of ice and uncertainty, where a single harsh winter could doom a village. Ragnarök's endless winter, the Fimbulvetr, wasn't just fantasy, it was their deepest nightmare given form. When volcanoes like Iceland's Eldgjá erupted in the 10th century, spewing ash that blotted out the sun for years, many believed the prophecies were coming true. Even the gods' struggles felt familiar. Thor's battle with the sea serpent Jörmungandr echoed Viking fishermen's daily fights against the ocean's fury. Yet Ragnarök wasn't purely despair. The Norns' vision included rebirth, a green world rising from the ashes where two human survivors would repopulate the earth. This twist reveals a profound Viking truth. Fate was inevitable but not meaningless. To face Ragnarök with courage was to earn a place in legend, like the Einherjar warriors feasting in Valhalla, ready to fight alongside Odin in the final battle. The Norns didn't just predict doom, they offered a blueprint for how to meet it: back straight, axe sharp, and eyes open. Modern archaeologists have found runestones etched with scenes from Ragnarök, proving how deeply these prophecies gripped the Viking mind. But here's the haunting question: did the Norns truly see the future, or were they simply reflecting the fears and hopes of a people living on the edge of the world? Perhaps both. The power of prophecy isn't just in accuracy, it's in the way it gives chaos a shape, turning the unthinkable into a story that can be faced, fought, and even survived. In the mist-shrouded forests of ancient Britain, where druids chanted beneath towering oaks, a figure emerged whose prophecies would shape the destiny of a kingdom. Merlin, the legendary sorcerer and advisor to King Arthur, was more than a wizard. He was a seer whose visions bridged the mortal and mystical worlds. His prophecies, recorded in texts like Geoffrey of Monmouth's The Prophecies of Merlin, wove together history, myth, and cryptic symbolism, foretelling the rise and fall of kings with eerie precision. One of his most famous predictions centered on the coming of the once and future king. Long before Arthur pulled the sword from the stone, Merlin spoke of a leader born of dragon's blood, a boy who would unite a fractured land under a single banner. But the prophecy carried a shadow. The kingdom will be both blessed and cursed by his reign, and so it was. Arthur's rule brought peace, but his downfall, a betrayal born of love and ambition, was also foretold. Merlin's words painted Camelot's glory and tragedy as two sides of the same coin, a reminder that even the greatest light casts the darkest shadow. What makes Merlin's visions so compelling isn't just their accuracy, but their layered meanings. When he warned of a white dragon and a red dragon locked in eternal battle, he wasn't merely describing beasts. The dragons symbolized the Saxons and the Britons, their bloody conflict shaping the fate of Britain. Centuries later, this imagery still echoes in Welsh flags and folklore. Merlin's genius lay in his ability to cloak truth in allegory, forcing listeners to look beyond the surface. His prophecies also blurred the line between the divine and the human. Before Arthur's birth, Merlin orchestrated events with the precision of a storyteller crafting his tale. He guided other Pendragon to disguise himself as Lady Igraine's husband, ensuring Arthur's conception, an act both cunning and unsettling. Was this destiny or manipulation? Merlin's prophecies suggest a terrifying idea. The future isn't just seen, it's shaped by those who dare to intervene. Yet even the great seer couldn't escape his own fate. Some legends claim Merlin foresaw his imprisonment, trapped by the enchantress Nimue in a cave or crystal tomb, a prisoner of his own magic. It's a haunting twist. The prophet who mastered time became its victim. Perhaps that's the deepest lesson of Merlin's prophecies. They weren't just about kings and battles. They explored the cost of knowledge, the weight of seeing too much. Today, scholars debate whether Merlin's predictions were political allegories, Celtic myths repurposed for a new era, or something stranger, but their power endures. Every time we speak of leaders who rise and fall like Arthur, or whisper of forces beyond our understanding, we're walking in Merlin's shadow. His prophecies remind us that destiny isn't a straight road, it's a tangled forest where every choice sends echoes rippling through time. Long before Hollywood turned it into a blockbuster doomsday tale, the Maya prophecy of 2012 was something far more profound, a celestial clockwork hidden in stone. The ancient Maya didn't predict the end of the world. They charted the cosmos with such precision that their long count calendar could track time over spans longer than 5,000 years. When that calendar reached the end of a cycle on December 21, 2012, modern panic erupted, but the truth, it was never about apocalypse. It was about renewal. The Maya saw time in vast, interlocking wheels. Their long count measured a cycle called the 13th Biakton, roughly 5,125 years. Reaching its end wasn't a cliff's edge, it was like a cosmic odometer rolling over, a moment to honor the gods and reset the count. Imagine it as an ancient New Year's Eve, not with fireworks but with rituals under star-strewn skies. The real prophecy lay in their astronomical genius. At that exact winter solstice, the sun aligned with the dark rift of the Milky Way, a rare event the Maya called the sacred tree. To them, this wasn't doom, it was a doorway. So how did this get twisted? Blame colonial misunderstandings and 20th century hype. When explorers rediscovered Maya ruins, they fixated on the calendar's end date, ignoring the glyphs that spoke of cyclical time. Pop culture latched onto the idea, spinning it into tales of asteroids, black holes, and collapsing planets. But Maya elders today laugh at the hysteria. Their ancestors weren't forecasting doom, they were marking a celestial reunion, a time when humanity might realign with the rhythms of the universe. The deeper irony. The Maya themselves lived through multiple calendar cycles without panic. Their cities thrived for centuries, their astronomers tracking Venus's path WITH Chinese letter smaller than modern telescopes. If anyone understood the long arc of time, it was them. Their true prophecy wasn't fear, it was a challenge, a reminder that civilizations rise and fall, but knowledge, like the stars, endures. The end of the Biakton wasn't a full stop, It was a semicolon in the story of existence, whispering, "Pay attention. The universe is speaking." In the ancient scriptures of Hinduism, where time spirals in cycles of creation and destruction, there exists a prophecy that feels both urgent and inevitable: the coming of Kalki, the 10th and final avatar of the god Vishnu. Unlike his previous incarnations, Rama the righteous king or Krishna the divine teacher, Kalki arrives not to guide but to cleanse. His purpose is singular: to bring an end to the Kali Yuga, the darkest age of human existence, where greed, deceit, and moral decay have poisoned the world. The Kali Yuga isn't just a metaphor. In Hindu cosmology, time is divided into 4 epochs, each shorter and more corrupt than the last. We're living in the Kali Yuga now, a period said to last 432,000 years, where virtue withers like a plucked flower. The texts describe it vividly. Rulers become thieves, families fracture, the earth grows barren, and even the sacred becomes commodified. Sound familiar? That's the chilling power of this prophecy. It mirrors our modern anxieties with uncanny precision. Kalki's arrival is foretold with cinematic grandeur. He'll ride a white horse named Devadatta, wielding a flaming sword that shines like a comet. His mission isn't punishment but renewal. The Vishnu Purana paints the scene. Armies of darkness will rise, but Kalki will cut through them like a storm through deadwood, purging the world of its rot. Yet this isn't a nihilistic end, it's a reset. After the destruction comes the Satya Yuga, a new golden age where truth and harmony reign once more. What makes this prophecy so compelling isn't just its drama, it's its flexibility. Unlike rigid doomsday predictions, Kalki's story adapts. Some interpret him as a literal warrior, others see him as a metaphor for collective awakening. Modern Hindu scholars even suggest Kalki could represent technological or spiritual evolution, a force that transforms society from within. The white horse might be a symbol of purity, the sword a metaphor for cutting through illusion. But here's the twist: Kalki's arrival isn't automatic. Ancient texts emphasize human agency. The worse the Kali Yuga becomes, the sooner Kalki comes. It's as if the prophecy is a mirror held to humanity, saying, your choices steer the timeline. In a world grappling with climate crisis, inequality, and war, this feels less like myth and more like a warning etched in fire. The Kali Yuga's end isn't just destiny, it's a call to action. Perhaps that's why Kalki endures. He's not just a destroyer, he's a promise. Even in the darkest age, the universe offers a path back to light. Whether he arrives on horseback or in the human heart, the message is the same. Decay is never final. After the long night, dawn always comes. Long before the Bible's book of Revelation or Islam's Day of Judgment, there was Frashokreti, the Zoroastrian vision of the universe's final reckoning. Imagine a world where fire doesn't just destroy but purifies, where every lie, every drop of suffering, every shadow of evil is burned away until only truth remains. This was the promise at the heart of ancient Persia's most sacred prophecy, a cosmic blueprint that would echo through millennia, shaping the very foundations of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Zoroastrianism, one of the world's oldest monotheistic religions, introduced a radical idea. The battle between good and evil wasn't eternal, it had an expiration date. At the climax of time, the righteous would face a final trial, a river of molten metal that would feel like warm milk to the pure but scald the wicked. The demonic Angra Mainyu, source of all corruption, would be defeated by Ahura Mazda, the god of light. Even the dead would rise, their bodies rejoining their souls for a last judgment. Then the earth itself would renew, mountains would smooth into plains, the oceans would turn sweet, and humanity would live in a perfected world, free from hunger, sickness, and deceit. The brilliance of this prophecy lies in its duality. It wasn't just about punishment, it was about restoration. Unlike the Norse Ragnarök, which ended in mutual annihilation, or the Mayan cycles that simply reset, Frashokreti promised active transformation. Evil wouldn't just be destroyed, it would be undone. This idea resonated far beyond Persia. When Jewish scholars were exiled to Babylon in the 6th century BC, they encountered Zoroastrian teachings. Elements of frashocracy seeped into Hebrew scripture, the resurrection of the dead in Daniel, the final battle in Ezekiel, even the concept of a Messiah who heralds a new age. Early Christians expanded these ideas into the Book of Revelation's fiery apocalypse, while Islam's Quran borrowed the imagery of a bridge over hell, a direct parallel to Zoroastrianism's Chinvat bridge where souls are judged. But here's what's often overlooked: the prophecy demanded human participation. Zoroastrians believed their actions hastened frashocracy. Every good deed, every truthful word was a strike against darkness. This wasn't passive waiting, it was a call to arms. Modern scholars see parallels in today's climate movements or social justice struggles, the idea that collective effort can tip the scales toward utopia. Yet the most haunting detail: Zoroastrians marked time by counting down to frashocracy. Their calendar didn't cycle endlessly, it progressed toward an endpoint. In a world where most ancient religions saw time as circular, this linear vision was revolutionary. It gave history purpose. We still live in its shadow every time someone says, "The arc of the moral universe bends toward justice." They're channeling a thought first carved into Persian tablets 3,000 years ago. The prophecy's legacy is everywhere, from courtroom oaths sworn on truth to sci-fi tales of redeemed worlds. Because frashocracy isn't just a prediction. It's an argument that the universe, no matter how fractured, can be made whole again. And perhaps that's why it endures, not as a relic but as a whisper from the past, urging us to believe in the possibility of light. In the arid mesas of the American Southwest, where the earth cracks under the sun and the wind carries whispers of ancestors, the Hopi people have safeguarded prophecies that stretch back further than written history. Carved not into stone but passed down through generations in stories and rituals, these predictions speak of a world out of balance, a warning that feels unnervingly modern. The Hopi don't just foresee the future, they map the consequences of human choices, tracing a path from greed to redemption with stark clarity. At the heart of their prophecies is the tale of two roads. One, paved with materialism and short-term gain, leads to environmental devastation and societal collapse. The other, built on harmony with nature and spiritual wisdom, offers renewal. The Hopi elders didn't need satellites or climate models to predict today's crises. They spoke of rivers drying up, of seasons twisting out of order, of a time when the earth would be ravaged by those who take more than they give. Sound familiar? It's as if they peered centuries ahead and described the Anthropocene era with terrifying accuracy. One of their most vivid warnings centers on the Day of Purification, a period of upheaval where humanity faces the consequences of its actions. But this isn't a Hollywood-style apocalypse. The Hopi envision it as a turning point, a chance to shed destructive habits and return to the Great Spirit's original instructions. Their prophecies even describe signs marking this transition: houses in the sky, airplanes, spiders' webs encircling the earth, the internet, and a gourd of ashes dropped from above, often interpreted as nuclear weapons. What's chilling isn't just the precision of these metaphors, but the fact that they were shared long before such technologies existed. Yet the Hopi don't traffic in doom. Their prophecies carry a thread of hope embodied by the figure of the true white brother, a spiritual leader who would emerge to guide humanity back to balance. Some interpret this as a call for indigenous wisdom to reclaim its place in global discourse. After all, the Hopi survived in the desert for millennia by practicing sustainable agriculture and communal living, solutions our modern world desperately needs. Their prophecies aren't just predictions, they're an invitation to change course. What makes these teachings so urgent today is their holistic view of crisis. The Hopi never separated environmental collapse from social decay. They predicted that as the earth suffered, so too would human relationships, families fracturing, leaders lying, communities losing their way. It's a vision that mirrors our age of disinformation and polarization. But here's the key difference. Where modern doomsayers often stop at warning, the Hopi offer a roadmap. Their prophecies detail rituals from water ceremonies to prayer stick offerings designed to restore balance. These aren't superstitions, they're ancient technologies for realigning humanity with natural law. Perhaps the greatest lesson lies in how the Hopi measure time. Unlike Western calendars ticking toward an arbitrary future, their ceremonial cycles mirror the Earth's rhythms, planting, harvesting, dancing the seasons into being. Their prophecies remind us that time isn't linear but relational. The future isn't fixed, it's shaped by every choice we make today. In an era of climate deadlines and tipping points, that might be the most radical prophecy of all. The power to rewrite the ending still rests in human hands. Beneath the shadow of China's imperial palaces, where emperors ruled by the mandate of heaven, one book held more sway than any army or edict, the I Ching, or Book of Changes. More than just a divination tool, this ancient text was a living oracle. Its hexagrams woven into the rise and fall of dynasties, the strategies of generals, and the whispers of court advisors. Its predictions weren't mere fortune-telling, they were a language of cosmic patterns, offering glimpses into the turning points of history. The I Ching's origins stretch back over 3,000 years to the Zhou dynasty's dawn. Legend says its core came from the mythical sage Fu Zai, who observed the cracks on tortoise shells, the earliest form of Chinese divination, and saw in them the 8 trigrams that became the book's foundation. But its true power emerged when King Wen of Zhou, imprisoned by a jealous emperor, expanded the trigrams into 64 hexagrams while awaiting execution. Each hexagram, a stack of 6 lines, some broken, some unbroken, represented a dynamic interplay of forces, heaven and earth, fire and water, the shifting balance of yin and yang. By casting yarrow stalks or coins, a seeker could consult the I Ching, receiving not a fixed prediction but a portrait of the moment's energy, a map of how to navigate the tides of fate. What made the I Ching indispensable to rulers was its uncanny relevance during crises. Before the Battle of Red Cliffs, a turning point in the Three Kingdoms period, advisors reportedly cast a hexagram that warned of fire over water. The interpretation, a naval attack using flame, a tactic that famously destroyed Cao Cao's fleet. Centuries later, the Tang dynasty's founder, Lai Yuan, allegedly consulted the text before rebelling against the Sui, receiving hexagram 14, Dayu, great possession. It symbolized abundance through alignment with heaven's will, a divine endorsement for his uprising. Even Mao Zedong, though publicly dismissive of old superstitions, secretly kept a well-worn copy, perhaps sensing its strategic depth. But the I Ching's genius lay in its fluidity. Unlike rigid prophecies, it didn't claim absolute truth. Its hexagrams were like weather vanes, revealing the winds of change. Take hexagram 23, bow, splitting apart. It might warn a dynasty of decay, but its commentary advised patience: do not act now, wait for the situation to clarify. This wasn't doomsaying, it was tactical wisdom. Emperors who heeded it could reform. Those who ignored it, like the last Ming rulers, often fell. The book's influence spilled beyond politics. Confucius supposedly said he'd study it for 50 years to avoid grave mistakes. Sun Tzu's Art of War echoes its principles of adaptability. Modern scientists, from Jung to quantum physicists, marvel at its resonance with probability and interconnectedness. Yet at its heart, the I Ching remains a mirror. It doesn't predict the future, it reveals the present's hidden currents, asking the seeker to align with them. Perhaps that's why it endures. In a world obsessed with fixed outcomes, the I Ching whispers an older truth. The future isn't written, it's woven, thread by thread, choice by choice, in the loom of now. And sometimes the wisest prophecy is the one that teaches us to see the pattern. Amid the golden sands of ancient Egypt, where pharaohs ruled as gods and the Nile's rhythm dictated life itself, a prophecy emerged that would echo through the ages, the words of the sage Nefertiti. Written during the Middle Kingdom, this prophetic poem didn't just foretell the future. It painted a scene of societal collapse so vivid, it felt less like prediction and more like a warning carved in stone. Nefertiti's vision began with a land in turmoil, the Nile running dry, neighbors invading, brother turning against brother, and the sacred order of Mat, the divine balance, shattered. But woven into this chaos was a promise. A savior king would rise, a ruler sent by the gods to restore Egypt to glory. What makes Nefertiti's prophecy so gripping isn't just its imagery, but its eerie alignment with real historical crises. Scholars believe it may reflect the First Intermediate Period, a time when Egypt fractured into warring states after the Old Kingdom's fall. Droughts starved the people, tombs were looted, and the pyramids stood as silent witnesses to a broken dynasty. Nefertiti's description of the sun veiled, unseeing its people, could mirror the climate catastrophes of that era, when volcanic eruptions as far away as Iceland may have dimmed the skies. Even his prediction of foreign invaders, the Asiatics in the Delta, their arrows thirsting for blood, matches archaeological evidence of Semitic tribes infiltrating the north. Yet the prophecy wasn't just doom. At its heart lay the figure of Amenemhat, a king of the south, a son of Nubia. This was no vague messiah. It was a direct nod to Amenemhat I, the pharaoh who reunified Egypt and founded the 12th dynasty. The poem's genius, it was likely composed after his reign, retelling past chaos to legitimize his rule. By framing Amenemhat as the prophesied savior, Nefertiti's words became political alchemy, transforming recent trauma into divine destiny. The deeper message, though, transcends any one ruler. Nefertiti's prophecy tapped into a universal theme, the cycle of order and chaos. Egyptians believed their world was perpetually one generation away from collapse, saved only by the pharaoh's sacred duty to uphold Mat. When Nefertiti spoke of a king who would drive out the evil like a storm sweeping chaff, he wasn't just flattering a monarch, he was reminding every listener civilization is fragile. Without justice, without leadership aligned with the gods, the sands would reclaim the temples. Centuries later, fragments of Nefertiti's prophecy still turn up in tombs and temples, proof of its enduring power. But its true legacy isn't in accuracy, it's in the uncomfortable question it leaves behind. How many societies have stared into the abyss Nefertiti described, watching the rivers dry and the strangers at the gates, praying for a savior who may never come? The prophecy's brilliance lies in its duality. It's both a mirror and a map, showing us how easily order crumbles, but also how hope can rise from the ruins if we're bold enough to rebuild. In the flickering firelight of a Norse hall, where the smell of mead and sweat hung thick in the air, a seeress once recited verses that would freeze the blood of even the bravest Viking. The Völuspá, the prophecy of the seeress, isn't just a poem. It's a cosmic obituary, a funeral song for gods penned centuries before their doom. Written down in Iceland's poetic Edda, but whispered long before in the oral traditions of Scandinavia, this haunting text doesn't just predict the end of the world. It orchestrates it step by brutal step with the precision of a master storyteller sharpening an axe. The poem begins with a flicker, an invitation. The seeress, awakened from the dead by Odin's magic, unravels time itself, starting with the birth of the universe from the void of Ginnungagap. But her true focus is Ragnarök, the twilight of the gods. She doesn't soften the blow. Brothers will kill brothers, fathers betray sons. The sun will blacken, the earth tremble, and the great wolf Fenrir snap his chains, his jaws stretching from earth to sky. The gods, knowing their fate, march to meet it anyway, a detail that captures the Viking ethos in one staggering moment. Even Odin, the All-Father, is devoured by Fenrir, only for his son Vidar to avenge him by tearing the beast apart bare-handed. Yet the Völuspá's power isn't just in its violence. It's in the eerie specificity of its omens. The seeress describes the cock Fjalla crowing to rally the giants, the ship Naglfar built from dead men's nails setting sail, and the fire giant Surtur engulfing the 9 realms in flames. These aren't vague symbols, they're visceral, almost tactile images that lodged in listeners' minds. When Iceland's volcanoes erupted during the Middle Ages, spewing ash that darkened the sky for years, many believed the Völuspá was unfolding before their eyes. What's often overlooked, though, is the prophecy's quiet hope. After the fires cool, the seeress reveals a world reborn green and fertile, where a new generation of gods inherits the golden chess pieces of their predecessors. 2 humans, Lif and Lifthrasir, emerge from Yggdrasil's bark, repopulating the earth. This twist is quintessentially Norse, even annihilation isn't final. Destruction clears space for renewal, like a forest fire nurturing new growth. The Völuspá's genius lies in its duality. It's both warning and comfort. To Vikings living in a harsh, unpredictable climate, the idea that even gods face inevitable doom, yet endure through legacy, was strangely reassuring. It mirrored their own lives, brief, brutal, but etched into memory through deeds. When warriors carved runes invoking the poem on their swords or amulets, they weren't just preparing for Ragnarök. They were aligning themselves with its defiant spirit, the audacity to fight on. Knowing the battle is already lost, modern scholars still debate whether the poem was purely myth or a reflection of real fears: climate change, volcanic winters, the fall of pagan faith to Christianity. But perhaps its true prophecy was simpler. Civilizations like gods rise and fall, yet from their embers something always remains. The Völuspá doesn't just predict the end. It teaches us how to meet it eyes open, heart unbroken, remembering that after the long night, dawn always returns. Across the turquoise waters of the Gulf of Mexico, where the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan rose like a jewel from the lake, a prophecy clung to the air like incense smoke, the promise that one day the feathered serpent god Quetzalcoatl would return from the east to reclaim his kingdom. This wasn't just a spiritual belief, it was a cultural landmine, and when Hernán Cortés and his conquistadors arrived in 1519, they stepped right onto it. The legend began centuries earlier with Topotzin Quetzalcoatl, a priest king of the Toltecs who ruled with wisdom and rejected human sacrifice. Banished by a rival god's dark magic, he sailed east on a raft of serpents, vowing to return in the year 1 Reed, a date that cycled every 52 years in the Aztec calendar. By cruel coincidence, Cortés landed on the exact year the prophecy predicted. His pale skin, his ships resembling floating temples, even his helmet's shape echoing Quetzalcoatl's plumed headdress, every detail fit the Aztec imagination like a key in a lock. Moctezuma, the Aztec emperor, hesitated. Was this the god king's return or a deadly trick? Cortés, no stranger to opportunism, leaned into the myth. He demanded gold as tribute, mimicking Quetzalcoatl's association with precious metals. When Aztec ambassadors presented him with a conch shell, a sacred item linked to the god's breath, the Spaniard blew into it, sealing their suspicions. But the real stroke of manipulation came later. As tensions flared, Cortés exploited another prophecy, that Quetzalcoatl's return would bring the end of the fourth sun, the current era of Aztec rule. By the time the Aztecs realized their mistake, smallpox and steel had already ravaged Tenochtitlan. The tragedy lies in the prophecy's dual nature. Some scholars argue it was a post-conquest fabrication, a story spun by surviving Aztecs to make sense of their trauma. Others point to pre-Hispanic codices like the Vaticanus A, which depict Quetzalcoatl's departure with tears in his eyes. Perhaps the real prophecy wasn't about a god's return, but a warning about the fragility of power, how even the mightiest empires can crumble when they mistake hunger for divinity. What lingers is the irony. Quetzalcoatl stood for knowledge and renewal, yet his myth brought destruction. The Spanish tore down his temples, but the feathered serpent refused to die. Today, his image adorns Mexican murals and revolutionary flags, a testament to prophecy's strange afterlives. They might not predict the future so much as reveal the stories we're willing to believe and the prices we pay for believing them. In the dusty scrolls of the Hebrew Bible, where lions' dens and fiery furnaces dominate the tales of Daniel, there lies a series of visions so precise they've sparked debates for over 2,000 years. Daniel, the Jewish exile turned Babylonian court advisor, didn't just interpret dreams, he lived them. His prophecies of rising and falling empires, cryptic timelines, and an ultimate divine reckoning became the backbone of apocalyptic thought, shaping everything from medieval theology to modern doomsday predictions. But to understand their power, we must step into the sandals of a man who saw history unfold before it happened. Take the famous statue dream in Daniel chapter 2, a towering figure with a head of gold, chest of silver, belly of bronze, legs of iron, and feet of iron mixed with clay. King Nebuchadnezzar woke trembling, demanding an explanation. Daniel, guided by divine insight, revealed the metals represented successive empires. Babylon's golden reign would give way to Persia's silver, then Greece's bronze, and finally Rome's iron might. But the crumbling clay feet, a sign that no human power lasts forever. What's staggering isn't just the accuracy. Babylon did fall to Persia, Persia to Greece, Greece to Rome, but the audacity of a captive predicting his captor's downfall to their faces. Then came the beasts. In chapter 7, Daniel witnessed 4 monstrous creatures rising from a chaotic sea: a lion with eagle's wings, a bear with ribs in its teeth, a leopard with 4 heads, and a terrifying beast with iron teeth and 10 horns. These weren't nightmares, they were geopolitical forecasts. Scholars see parallels to the same empires: Babylon's winged lions, Persia's ravenous expansion, Greece's swift conquests under Alexander, and Rome's crushing dominance. But the climax, a divine figure called the Ancient of Days, judges the beasts, and one like a son of man receives eternal dominion. For early Christians, this was a blueprint. Jesus would return as that heavenly judge, ending earthly kingdoms. Yet Daniel's most explosive prophecy lies in chapter 9, the 70 weeks vision. An angel tells Daniel that 70 weeks of years, 490 total, are decreed for his people. From the rebuilding of Jerusalem to the coming of a Messiah the Prince, the timeline seemed to point to Jesus' era, but here's where interpretations diverge. Some Jews saw the Anointed One as High Priest Onias, murdered centuries before Christ. Many Christians split the prophecy, claiming the final week remains unfulfilled, a future 7-year tribulation before Christ's return. This gap theory birthed the rapture doctrine, end times novels, and even modern political alliances centered on Israel. The legacy of Daniel's visions is unmatched. His imagery of abominations desolating temples inspired the Maccabean revolt against Greek oppressors. His 4th beast fueled medieval fears of the Antichrist. Even secular historians marvel at how his schema empires rising and falling toward a climax shaped Western views of history as linear, not cyclical. But perhaps the real prophecy was subtler, that faith could outlast empires. Daniel, after all, survived the lions by trusting something beyond kings and gold. His visions weren't just about doom. They whispered that no matter how monstrous the beast, the final word belongs to the divine. High in the snow-locked Himalayas, where the air is thin and the stars burn with icy clarity, there exists a legend of a kingdom hidden beyond time, Shambhala. In Tibetan Buddhist texts, this is no ordinary place. It's a sanctuary of enlightened beings, a realm where wisdom and compassion reign supreme, untouched by the chaos of the outside world. But Shambhala isn't just a myth. It's the heart of a prophecy so potent that it has driven explorers, scholars, and even dictators to search for its secrets. The Kalachakra Tantra, one of Tibetan Buddhism's most complex teachings, holds the key. According to its verses, Shambhala will remain veiled until the world plunges into its darkest age, a time of war, greed, and spiritual decay. Sound familiar? Then, when hope seems lost, a line of enlightened kings will emerge from Shambhala's gates, leading an army of light against the forces of ignorance. The final battle won't be fought with swords, but with wisdom, a cosmic reckoning that restores balance to existence itself. What's fascinating is how Shambhala's prophecy mirrors real-world anxieties. In the 17th century, Tibetan monks identified specific signs marking its approach: rulers who exploit their people, forests crumbling into deserts, and souls so lost they mistake material wealth for happiness. Fast forward to today, and these warnings feel less like ancient scripture and more like headlines, yet the prophecy's brilliance lies in its duality. Shambhala isn't just a refuge, it's a call to action. Buddhist masters teach that the kingdom exists on multiple levels, as a physical place though hidden, a state of mind achievable through meditation, and a future possibility humanity can manifest through ethical living. This layered meaning has fueled countless quests. In the 1920s, Soviet occultists convinced Stalin that Shambhala held supernatural weapons, sparking failed expeditions into Mongolia. The Nazis, obsessed with Aryan mysticism, sent teams to Tibet seeking its power. Even modern adventurers scour satellite images, convinced the kingdom lies in Siberia's Altai Mountains or the Taklamakan Desert's shifting sands. But the Dalai Lama offers a quieter truth. If you prepare your mind properly, you can reach Shambhala in your own heart. Perhaps that's the real prophecy. Shambhala isn't a dot on a map, but a mirror. Its emergence depends less on geography than on human choices. When the world forgets compassion, the kingdom retreats. When we cultivate wisdom, it draws nearer. The battle foretold isn't against outer darkness, but the shadows within, a reminder that enlightenment isn't found in some distant valley, but in the courage to face ourselves. On the mist-shrouded battlefields of ancient Ireland, where ravens circled like living shadows, the Morrigan's voice carried the weight of inevitability. More than just a goddess of war, she was a prophetess of blood and sovereignty, a phantom figure who appeared to warriors and kings with whispers of triumph or doom. Unlike other seers who spoke in riddles, the Morrigan's prophecies were stark as a blade's edge, unflinching, personal, and often ruthless. One of her most chilling predictions unfolded in the Tain Bo Cuelnge, the epic tale of Cu Chulainn. As armies gathered for the catastrophic cattle raid of Cooley, the Morrigan appeared to the hero in multiple guises: a beautiful woman offering alliance, a crimson-horned heifer stampeding through the ranks, even a wolf tearing at men's throats. Each time her message was the same: join me or fall. When Cu Chulainn refused her patronage, she foretold his demise in visceral detail. Your wounds will gape like mouths, your fame will turn to ash. And so it happened. The prophecy wasn't a passive warning, it was a curse set in motion by his defiance. Yet the Morrigan's visions weren't just about destruction. She was deeply tied to the land's sovereignty, the mystical bond between ruler and realm. In the Leber Gabála Iren, she prophesied Ireland's cyclical invasions from the Fir Bolg to the Tuatha De Danann, each wave of conquest fulfilling an older, darker pattern. Before the Battle of Mag Tuaird, she circled the battlefield singing a haunting lay, predicting which kings would rise and which would become food for ravens. Her words weren't mere spectacle, they shaped the outcome. Warriors who heard their fate in her verses often fought toward it, as if the prophecy itself steeled their arms or broke their spirits. What makes the Morrigan's role so unique is her active participation in the futures she foretold. While Delphi's oracle observed from afar, the Morrigan waded into the fray. She'd appear as a washerwoman scrubbing blood-stained armor, a sign the observer would soon die. She'd shapeshift into a crow to pluck the eyes from doomed soldiers mid-battle. Her prophecies weren't just spoken, they were performed, blurring the line between prediction and causation. Modern archaeologists have found eerie echoes of her cult. At the ritual site of Uisneach, bird bones and weapons buried in bogs suggest ceremonies where kings sought her favor. the Morrígan demanded more than reverence, she required confrontation. To earn the right to rule, aspirants had to face her in symbolic combat, often through druidic rites, fail, and the land itself would reject them, succeed, and her prophecies became their mandate. Perhaps her most enduring legacy is how she redefined power. The Morrígan didn't just predict who'd win a crown, she revealed the cost of wearing it. When she told the warrior King Croesus that his own greed would strangle his reign, she wasn't cursing him. She was reminding him that true sovereignty wasn't taken, it was earned through balance. In an age of climate crises and crumbling institutions, that lesson feels less like ancient myth and more like a warning we've yet to heed. The Morrigan's prophecies endure because they're not about fate. They're about choice and the terrible beauty of consequences. In the sacred texts of Japan's Shinto tradition, where emperors trace their lineage straight to the divine, one prophecy pulses like a hidden heartbeat: the tale of Amaterasu, the sun goddess, whose wrath once plunged the world into darkness. According to the Kojiki, Japan's oldest chronicle, Amaterasu retreated into a cave after her brother, the storm god Susanoo, ravaged her rice fields and murdered her attendants. Without her light, the world withered, crops failed, spirits withered, and chaos reigned. But what began as a myth of celestial drama soon became something far more potent: a political prophecy, a spiritual mandate, and a warning about the consequences of losing divine favor. The gods tried everything to lure Amaterasu back, singing, dancing, even planting a sacred mirror and jewels outside the cave. But it was the goddess Yuzum's riotous laughter as she danced atop an overturned barrel that finally sparked Amaterasu's curiosity. Peering out, she caught her own radiant reflection in the mirror, mistaking it for another sun. The gods seized the moment, pulling her into the world again. Light returned, but the deeper message lingered. The sun's presence wasn't guaranteed. It depended on harmony, ritual, and respect for the cosmic order. This myth wasn't just folklore, it was the cornerstone of Japan's imperial legitimacy. The Yota no Kagami, the mirror used to lure Amaterasu, became one of the three sacred treasures of the imperial regalia, passed down through generations as proof of the emperor's divine right to rule. The prophecy implicit in the story was clear: as long as the emperor honored Amaterasu's legacy, her light would shine on Japan. But if that bond broke, so too would the nation's prosperity. This idea wasn't abstract. In the 14th century, when the northern and southern courts fought for supremacy, each side claimed to hold the true regalia, arguing that their rival's lack of divine connection would bring calamity. Even in 1945, as World War II raged, some whispered that Japan's suffering stemmed from straying from Amaterasu's path. Yet the prophecy's brilliance lies in its duality. Amaterasu's retreat wasn't just punishment, it was an invitation to restoration. The rituals to coax her back, from the rhythmic Kagura dances to the offerings at Ai's shrine, became blueprints for maintaining balance. Every emperor's enthronement ceremony, the Daijusai, reenacts this myth, with the ruler symbolically sharing a meal with the goddess to renew their covenant. The message, sovereignty isn't just power, it's responsibility. Modern Japan still wrestles with this legacy. When Emperor Akihito abdicated in 2019, the first time in 2 centuries, scholars debated whether it risked breaking the sacred line. Meanwhile, at Ai's shrine, rebuilt every 20 years in a cycle of renewal, priests keep Amaterasu's mirror enshrined, a silent promise that her light will never vanish again. The prophecy endures because it's not about the past, it's about the fragile, flickering bond between the divine and the mortal, and the ceaseless work to keep it alight. In the heart of ancient Babylon, where the Euphrates River coiled like a serpent around ziggurats that scraped the heavens, the fate of kings and empires hinged on the whispered words of a god, Marduk. More than just the patron deity of Babylon, Marduk was the divine architect of political order, his prophecies woven into the very fabric of Mesopotamian kingship. To rule Babylon wasn't merely to command armies or collect taxes. It was to stand as Marduk's chosen vessel, his voice echoing through the rituals that kept chaos at bay. The Enuma Elish, Babylon's epic of creation, spelled out the covenant in stark terms. After Marduk defeated the primordial goddess Tiamat, splintering her body to form the cosmos, the gods granted him the tablet of destinies, the power to decree fates. This wasn't just myth, it was political theology. Every New Year's festival, the Akitu, reenacted this drama. The king would enter the Esagila temple, stripped of his regalia, and kneel before Marduk's statue. A high priest would strike the monarch's face, a ritual humiliation proving his submission to the god's will. Only then could the king reclaim his crown, his rule sanctified for another year. The message was clear: rebellion against Marduk wasn't just blasphemy, it was an existential threat to the state. Marduk's prophecies often surfaced in moments of crisis. When invaders threatened, his oracles warned of upheaval unless the king proved worthy. The prophecy of Marduk, a text etched onto cuneiform tablets, described the god abandoning Babylon in disgust at its corruption, only to return generations later with a righteous ruler. Historians see traces of real events here: the traumatic sack of Babylon by the Hittites in 1595 BCE, or the later Kassite dynasty's rise. These weren't vague pronouncements, they were celestial report cards grading each regime's legitimacy. But Marduk's most potent prophecy was his silence. When the Assyrian king Sennacherib razed Babylon in 689 BCE, looting Marduk's statue, chronicles recorded omens of discord, locust swarms, stillbirths, even dogs howling in the temples. The lesson: without Marduk's presence, the machinery of empire ground to a halt. Sennacherib's assassination by his own sons, and his successor Esarhaddon's desperate efforts to rebuild Babylon, were seen as divine retribution. The god's absence wasn't just spiritual, it was a geopolitical earthquake. The brilliance of Marduk's cult lay in its flexibility. Conquerors like Cyrus the Great, who took Babylon in 539 BC, didn't smash his altars, they embraced them. Cyrus posed as Marduk's restorer, claiming the god had summoned him to end Nabonidus's misrule. This wasn't mere propaganda, it was survival. To hold Babylon, you had to kneel to its god. Even Alexander the Great, centuries later, planned to rebuild Marduk's ziggurat, sensing its symbolic power. What lingers isn't just the grandeur of these rituals, but their naked truth: power, no matter how absolute, answers to a higher story. Marduk's prophecies weren't about foreseeing the future, they were about controlling it, threading mortal ambition through the eye of divinity's needle. In today's world, where leaders still wrap themselves in the mantle of destiny, the echo of Babylon's god-king pact rings unnervingly familiar. The faces change. The stakes don't. High in the Andes, where the air thins and the condors carve circles in the sky, the Inca didn't just mark time, they danced with it. To them, existence moved in great spirals, eras of order and chaos called pachacutes, each one a cosmic turning that shattered the old world to make space for the new. And no prophecy captured this rhythm more dramatically than the legend of the ninth Inca, the ruler who took the concept as his name, Pachacuti, the world shaker. His reign wasn't just political, it was apocalyptic in the truest sense, a revelation that destruction and rebirth were two sides of the same sacred coin. Before Pachacuti, Cusco was a modest kingdom, its people living in the shadow of older empires. Then, according to Inca chronicles, the earth itself spoke. In a vision, the creator god Viracocha appeared to the young prince, promising him power, but only if he wielded it as a force of renewal. The prophecy came with a warning. When the world grows heavy with greed, when the rivers forget their songs, the mountains will tremble and the old order will crumble like dried clay. Pachacuti listened. He rebuilt Cusco into the heart of an empire, its streets laid out in the shape of a puma, its temples plated with gold to catch the sun's first light. But the heart of his revolution wasn't conquest, it was time itself. The Inca didn't fear the end of days, they expected it. Their calendar, tied to the solstices and the Pleiades star cluster, marked cycles of roughly 500 years. At each Pachacuti, society would unravel natural disasters, invasions, rebellions only to be rewoven by a chosen leader. The Spanish conquest in the 16th century fit this pattern eerily well. When Atahualpa, the last sovereign Inca, met Francisco Pizarro, some priests saw it as fulfillment, the old era dying so a new one could emerge. Even the violence that followed, the shattered temples and melted sacred gold, mirrored prophecies of the fifth sun's collapse. Yet the prophecy's brilliance lay in its paradox. Pachacuti wasn't just doom, it was an alchemical process turning decay into fertility. The Incas' famous terraced farms, carved into mountains like stairways for giants, were acts of faith in this cycle. Landslides would come, but the Andes terraces would hold the soil, ensuring rebirth. Today, Quechua elders still speak of the next Pachacuti, not as an ending but as an awakening. When highways crack and glaciers vanish, when politicians steal the voice of the earth, they nod and say, "The world is turning again." Perhaps that's the lesson etched into Andean stone. Time doesn't move in a line, it spirals, and every catastrophe carries within it the seed of its own redemption, waiting for hands willing to plant it. The Inca didn't build their empire to last forever. They built it to teach the world how to begin again. Beneath the scorching Mesopotamian sun, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers carved life into the dust, the Epic of Gilgamesh wasn't just a story, it was a mirror held up to humanity's oldest obsession. The Sumerian king's desperate quest for immortality, etched into clay tablets over 4,000 years ago, reveals a civilization wrestling with a truth as sharp as a scribe's stylus. Even the mightiest mortals are bound by the gods' unbreakable laws. Gilgamesh's journey begins with raw grief. When his wild-hearted brother Enkidu dies, the mighty king who once laughed at walls and armies collapses like a shattered ziggurat. For the first time, he faces something no strength can conquer: time. His subsequent odyssey to find Utnapishtim, the immortal flood survivor, isn't just an adventure, it's a metaphysical rebellion. He crosses the waters of death, outwits scorpion men, and even retrieves the plant of heartbeat from the ocean floor, only to lose it to a serpent's theft. The message is brutal and beautiful. Immortality isn't for the living, but Gilgamesh's failure is where the real prophecy lies. Mesopotamians saw fate as a tapestry woven by the gods, with each human life a single thread. The Namta, or destiny decreed at birth, couldn't be unwoven, not even by kings. Tablets like the death of Gilgamesh describe the hero's final moments, where the divine council confirms his mortal end, sealing his fate alongside all humanity. Yet there's a twist. Though Gilgamesh never gains eternal life, he achieves something perhaps more precious. Through his deeds, his city's walls, and the epic itself, he becomes immortal in memory. The gods give him a paradoxical gift, the very legend we're recounting today. This tension between divine will and human ambition shaped Mesopotamia's worldview. Omens weren't merely predictions, they were glimpses of a preordained order. When liver diviners examined sheep entrails or when astrologers tracked Venus's movements, they weren't trying to change fate, they sought to align with it. A tablet from Nineveh warns, the gods allotted death to humans, keeping life for themselves. Even the Enuma Elish, Babylon's creation epic, frames mortals as afterthoughts, created to serve the gods, not rival them. What makes Gilgamesh's prophecy resonate isn't its despair, but its defiance. The epic ends with the king gazing at Uruk's towering walls, realizing his legacy lies not in evading death, but in what he builds despite it. Modern excavators have found echoes of this philosophy in Sumerian lamentations and royal inscriptions, where kings boast less of their victories than of their canals dug and temples raised, earthly things that outlast them. Perhaps that's the deepest lesson coiled within these clay tablets. The Mesopotamians, like Gilgamesh, knew the game was rigged, yet they kept playing, stacking mud bricks toward the sky. inscribing their names into eternity, one Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter at a time. Their prophecy wasn't about resignation, it was a dare. If we can't cheat death, we can still make it blink. Beneath the towering oaks of ancient Slavic lands, where storms rolled across the horizon like divine chariots, the voice of Perun thundered through the ages. The god of lightning and war wasn't just a bringer of rain or a slayer of dragons. He was a seer whose prophecies carved the destiny of the cosmos itself. According to Slavic lore, Perun foretold a time when the world would tremble under the weight of a great battle, where the forces of light and darkness would collide in a final, earth-shaking reckoning. The heart of this prophecy lies in the eternal struggle between Perun and his nemesis, Veles, the serpent god of chaos and the underworld. Their conflict wasn't just myth, it was a cosmic blueprint. Every lightning strike was Perun's spear hurled at Veles, who slithered through roots and rivers, corrupting the ordered world. But the most chilling prediction came in fragments passed down through folk songs and whispered tales. One day, the battle would escalate beyond the divine. The skies would darken, the earth would split, and the great oak that held up the heavens would shudder. Yet Perun's vision wasn't pure doom. Like the Norse Ragnarök, it carried a thread of renewal. Some versions speak of a new golden age emerging after the storm, where the surviving gods and purified souls would rebuild. Folk traditions even describe signs preceding the cataclysm: winters without end, rivers running backward, and the stars themselves trembling in their courses. Sound familiar? These motifs echo across global prophecies, as if ancient cultures tapped into the same primal fears. What makes Perun's prophecy unique is its deep ties to Slavic identity. When Christian missionaries arrived, they didn't erase Perun, they rebranded him. His lightning became the wrath of Elijah the Thunderer, his sacred groves turned into chapels. Yet in remote villages, old rituals lingered. Farmers still left offerings at oak stumps during droughts, and folktales whispered of the god who will return. Even today, when a storm rumbles over the Carpathians, some say it's Perun keeping watch and warning. The real power of this prophecy isn't in its inevitability, but in its lesson. Chaos and order are locked in an endless dance. Perun's battle isn't just coming, it's already here, in every storm, every struggle, every time humanity stands at the crossroads of destruction and rebirth. The question isn't whether the lightning will strike, it's whether we're ready to weather the storm. Across the vast blue expanse of the Pacific, where waves whisper secrets older than memory, the Polynesian trickster god Maui didn't just play pranks, he shaped destiny itself. Legends say this mischievous demigod once hooked his magic fishhook into the ocean floor and hauled up entire islands from the depths, creating the very lands his people would call home. But woven into these creation tales is something deeper, a prophecy about humanity's relationship with the sea, a warning about greed, and a navigational wisdom that would guide voyagers across thousands of miles of open ocean. Maui's most famous feat, fishing up the Hawaiian Islands, wasn't just a whimsical act. According to the Cumulipo, Hawaii's creation chant, his actions set a sacred covenant. The islands were alive, breathing entities that demanded respect. When Maui's brothers ignored his warnings and greedily hacked at the still-forming land, causing it to break apart, the prophecy embedded in the story became clear: take without gratitude and the gift will fracture. This ethos shaped Polynesian culture for centuries. Fishermen gave offerings before setting sail, and farmers treated the earth as a partner rather than a resource. Practices that sustained island nations long before the concept of sustainability entered modern lexicons. Yet Maui's prophecies also held practical genius. His celestial exploits, like lassoing the sun to slow its journey across the sky, encoded advanced astronomical knowledge. Polynesian navigators used these very myths as star maps. The tale of Maui's fishhook, for instance, mirrors the constellation Scorpio, which rises in the South Pacific during peak fishing season. Oral traditions describing his voyages preserved critical wayfinding techniques, reading ocean swells, tracking bird flight paths, and interpreting cloud formations over distant land. These weren't just stories, they were survival manuals disguised as divine adventures. The darker side of Maui's prophecies emerged in his final act, the quest for immortality. Determined to conquer death, Maui entered the goddess Hain Nui, Te-Po's womb as she slept, intending to exit through her mouth and thus reverse life's cycle. But when a laughing bird alerted her, the goddess crushed him between her thighs. His failure carried a sobering message: some boundaries, even for demigods, shouldn't be crossed. For Polynesians, this wasn't just a lesson about mortality, it was a warning against overreach. When European ships arrived centuries later, some elders saw echoes of Maui's fate in the foreigners' relentless expansion. Today, Maui's legacy lives in unexpected ways. The resurgence of traditional Polynesian wayfinding, like the voyages of the Hokulea canoe using only ancient methods, proves his prophecies were never static. They were living traditions, adapting like the ocean itself. When Hawaiian activists chant Maui's stories while protesting telescope construction on sacred Mauna Kea, they're invoking his most enduring truth: that land isn't just territory, it's kin. The trickster's greatest lesson: sometimes the most profound prophecies aren't about predicting the future, but remembering how to belong to the world. In the golden halls of ancient Persia, where the scent of saffron and sandalwood perfumed the air, King Jamshid ruled over a kingdom that seemed touched by divine favor. His was an era of unimaginable prosperity. Rivers ran with honey, disease vanished like morning mist, and the earth yielded crops without the bite of the plow. The mythical king, said to possess the glowing halo of divine kingship, didn't just reign, he reshaped reality itself. But woven into these legends of abundance was a prophecy far darker, a warning that prosperity could crumble as swiftly as it rose, and that even the mightiest rulers were bound by the unforgiving cycles of time. Jamshid's reign began with miracles. The Shahnameh, Persia's epic book of kings, describes how he invented wine, crafted the first armor, and divided society into priests, warriors, and farmers, laying the foundations of civilization. His 700-year rule was a golden age where justice flowed as freely as the Tigris and Euphrates. Yet the Zoroastrian Denkard hints at the prophecy lurking beneath this splendor. The god Ahura Mazda had granted Jamshid the power to see 3 centuries into the future, and what he witnessed was his own downfall. The vision revealed a time when his people, drunk on their own comfort, would grow arrogant. The king himself, intoxicated by the far's glow, would forget his divine mandate, declaring, "I am the creator, the sustainer, the destroyer." The moment Jamshid claimed divinity, the far abandoned him, fluttering away like a frightened bird. The consequences were catastrophic. Winter gripped the land for the first time, snow piled where roses once bloomed, and famine gnawed at the kingdom's bones. The once loyal Zahak, a prince with serpents sprouting from his shoulders, rose in rebellion, sealing Jamshid's fate. The king who had once walked among stars was sawed in half, his death marking the end of an era. But here's the twist: the prophecy wasn't just about hubris, it was a mirror held up to Persia's own imperial anxieties. The Achaemenid kings, who later ruled one of history's largest empires, invoked Jamshid's tale to remind themselves no dynasty lasts forever. What makes this prophecy so enduring is its psychological depth. Jamshid's fall wasn't caused by external enemies, it was an implosion, a rot from within. The Bundahishan, a Zoroastrian text, frames his decline as a moral lesson. Prosperity without wisdom is a pyramid balanced on its tip. Modern scholars see parallels in the collapse of real Persian empires, from the Achaemenids to the Sasanians, where internal corruption often preceded invasion. The prophecy's brilliance lies in its universality. Every golden age carries the seeds of its own decay, whether it's Rome's excesses or the speculative bubbles of today's economies. Yet the tale doesn't end in despair. Later traditions speak of Jamshid's return. In some Sufi poems, he reincarnates as a wandering dervish, stripped of his crown but rich in humility. Others claim his spirit lingers in Nowruz, the Persian New Year, where families set a symbolic haft-sin table with apples, garlic, and sprouts, each item a reminder of balance and renewal. The prophecy, then, is cyclical. Kingdoms rise and fall, but the lessons remain, waiting to be remembered. Jamshid's legacy isn't just a warning, it's an invitation to rule, not with the arrogance of a god, but with the wisdom of a gardener, tending carefully to the fragile soil of human ambition. In the frozen forests of Finland, where the northern lights flicker like celestial fires, an ancient myth pulses through the land, the legend of the Sampo. More than just a magical artifact, this mysterious object from the Kalevala, Finland's national epic, carries a prophecy woven into the very soul of the nation. Forged by the blacksmith god Ilmarinen, the Sampo was no ordinary treasure. It ground out endless salt, grain, and gold, bringing prosperity to its owners, but its destruction sparked a chain of events that would shape Finnish destiny. The Kalevala describes the Sampo's creation in a contest of divine skill. The wizard Väinämöinen and the smith Ilmarinen traveled to the dark land of Pohjola, where the cunning witch Louhi demanded the Sampo as the price for her daughter's hand. Ilmarinen, with his otherworldly craftsmanship, hammered the artifact from the feather of a swan, the milk of a barren cow, a grain of barley, and the wool of a summer sheep, ingredients symbolizing the impossible made real. But the Sampo's power came with a catch. It couldn't belong to one side forever. Its prophecy was one of inevitable conflict, a cycle of loss and rebirth. When Väinämöinen and Ilmarinen later stole the Sampo back from Louhi, the witch pursued them in a storm-soaked battle so fierce it shattered the artifact into pieces. Some fragments sank into the sea while others washed ashore, each carrying a fragment of its magic. This moment wasn't just a plot twist, it was a metaphor for Finland's own struggles. The scattering of the Sampo mirrored the nation's resilience through centuries of foreign rule, its culture and identity fragmented but never fully destroyed. The deeper prophecy lies in what the Sampo represents. Scholars debate whether it was a mill, a compass, or even a symbol of the world tree, but its true power was as a mirror. For 19th century Finns, emerging from Swedish and Russian domination, the Kalevala became a rallying cry. The Sampo's fragments symbolized the scattered pieces of Finnish heritage waiting to be reclaimed. When Elias Lönnrot compiled the Kalevala from oral traditions in the 1800s, he wasn't just preserving folklore, he was reforging a nation's soul. Today, the Sampo's legacy echoes in Finland's modern identity. The country's rapid rise from agrarian poverty to technological powerhouse mirrors the Sampo's promise of abundance. Yet the prophecy's warning remains: wealth without wisdom is fragile. The Kalevala reminds Finns that true prosperity isn't in clinging to magic, but in embracing change, just as the Sampo's fragments, lost to the waves, still whisper promises of renewal from the depths. For over 60,000 years, long before the first pyramids scraped the sky or the wheel turned in Mesopotamia, Australia's Aboriginal cultures were weaving prophecy into the very landscape. These weren't scrolls locked in temples or carvings hidden in caves. The Dreamtime prophecies lived in songlines, the rhythmic stories etched into the earth itself. To walk these ancient pathways was to hear the whispers of ancestors who saw time not as a straight line, but as a living, breathing spiral where past, present, and future danced together. One of the most striking visions comes from the Yolngu people of Arnhem Land. Their elders speak of a Dreamtime warning called Beru, the saltwater crocodile ancestor, who foretold a time when the water would rise and eat the land. For generations, this was understood as a spiritual metaphor until coastal erosion and climate change made it literal. When Cyclone Tracy devastated Darwin in 1974, elders recognized the unfolding of Beru's prophecy. But here's what outsiders often miss. The warning wasn't just about environmental catastrophe. It carried instructions. The songlines detail which mangrove groves to protect as natural barriers, which sacred sites to relocate inland survival knowledge encoded in allegory centuries before modern ecology existed. Further south, the Merowari nation's prophecies tell of Morrígan, a great shaking of the earth when kinship laws are broken. This wasn't superstition, it was social science in narrative form. When miners began blasting sacred sites like the Burrup Peninsula, elders pointed to the Morrígan warnings. Disrespect for the land would fracture human relationships too. Sure enough, as rock art millennia-old crumbled, so did community health, with spikes in addiction and violence. The prophecy revealed what Western thought is only now grasping: ecology and sociology aren't separate. Poison the land and you poison the culture that grew from it. What makes these prophecies revolutionary is their medium. Without written language, Aboriginal peoples perfected an oral tradition so precise that a single ceremony could preserve agricultural cycles, animal migrations, and moral codes for hundreds of generations. The Warlpiri people's Jukurpa stories, for instance, don't just describe how the honey ant ancestor created waterholes. They embed rainfall patterns and edible plant locations into the narrative. During Australia's millennial drought, communities using these stories located hidden springs that modern hydrogeology had missed. Perhaps the most urgent prophecy comes from the Gunditjmara, custodians of the Budge Bim eel traps older than Stonehenge. Their dreaming stories speak of Kuyong, the eel spirit, who warned that overharvesting would make the waters turn to dust and the people to strangers. In the 1960s, when commercial fishing collapsed eel stocks, the prophecy proved tragically accurate, but the Gunditjmara didn't just lament, they acted. Using Kuyong's teachings, they revived traditional trap systems that sustained ecosystems while providing food, proving that ancient prophecy could be the key to modern sustainability. This is the genius of Dreamtime wisdom. These stories weren't passive predictions, they were blueprints for resilience, forged over ice ages and baked into collective memory. When elders today speak of reading country, they mean observing the land the way a librarian reads a book, noting which birds nest where, which flowers bloom early, interpreting signs as footnotes to ancestral warnings. In an age of climate crisis, that might be the most valuable prophecy of all, not just foreseeing the storm, but remembering how to build the ark. In the shadowy realms of Gnostic mysticism, where the material world was seen as a flawed illusion, one of the most profound prophecies whispered through the ages: the fall and redemption of Sophia, the divine wisdom. This wasn't just a myth, it was a cosmic roadmap, a revelation of how the universe fractured and how it might one day be made whole again. According to ancient Gnostic texts like the Apocryphon of John and the Pistis Sophia, Sophia existed beyond time, a radiant emanation of the true, unknowable God. But in a moment of longing, she reached beyond her station, desiring to create without her divine counterpart. From that yearning, a rupture tore through the heavens. Sophia's misstep birthed the demiurge, a flawed, arrogant creator who mistook himself for the supreme god and fashioned the physical world as a prison of matter. The tragedy wasn't just the creation of a broken universe, it was Sophia's own exile within it. Trapped in the lower realms, she became Pistis Sophia, faithful wisdom, a weeping figure of light drowning in chaos. Yet here lies the prophecy's heart. Even in her fall, Sophia left clues, sparks of divine knowledge hidden in human souls, fragments of the lost wholeness waiting to be remembered. The Gnostics saw this as the ultimate human mission, to awaken those sparks through gnosis, the secret knowledge that could guide the soul back to its origin. They believed that when enough souls remembered their divinity, Sophia would be lifted from the abyss, the demiurge's illusion would shatter, and the universe would realign with its true nature. This wasn't a distant apocalypse, it was an inner revolution, a personal and collective awakening. What makes the prophecy so haunting is how it mirrors the human condition. Sophia's longing mirrors our own restless searches for meaning in a world that often feels alien and flawed. the demiurge's arrogance echoes in systems of power that claim absolute authority, whether political or religious. And the hidden sparks, they're the moments of transcendence we all glimpse in love, art, or sudden clarity that hint at something grander beyond the veil. Modern scholars debate whether the Gnostics were heretics or visionaries, but their prophecy's endurance speaks for itself. From Jung's psychological interpretation of Sophia as the anima to contemporary mystic traditions that see her as a guide for cosmic reconciliation, the story refuses to fade. Perhaps because it's not just about Sophia's redemption, it's about ours. Every act of wisdom, every rejection of false idols becomes a stitch in the torn fabric of the divine. The prophecy whispers that no fall is final, no darkness unbreakable, so long as we keep searching for the light. Deep in the heart of ancient Italy, where the Etruscans once built their labyrinthine tombs and read omens in the flight of birds, a prophecy pulsed through the civilization like a slow, rhythmic drumbeat. They believed time moved not in a straight line, but in 10 great cycles called secula, each one a distinct era with its own character, its own destiny, and most crucially, its own expiration date. Unlike the linear march of history we imagine today, the Etruscan worldview was a spiral where each saeculum lasted roughly the length of a human lifetime, around 80 years before dissolving into the next. But here's where it gets chilling. The transition between cycles wasn't gentle. It was marked by fire, upheaval, and the collapse of the old order, a necessary destruction to make way for rebirth. The Etruscans didn't just predict these cycles, they ritualized them. Their priests, known as haruspices, scrutinized lightning strikes and animal entrails for signs of impending change. A bolt of lightning from the northwest, for instance, signaled the god's displeasure and often preceded a crisis. The most famous of these prophecies, preserved in fragments by Roman historians like Cicero, warned that the Etruscan people themselves would vanish after 10 secula, a prediction that came true when Rome absorbed their culture. But the Romans, ever the opportunists, didn't discard the prophecy. They stole it. When Augustus became Rome's first emperor, he faced a problem: how to legitimize his rule after a century of civil wars. Enter the secula. His advisor, the scholar Varro, recalculated the cycles to align with Rome's founding, declaring that Augustus's reign marked the dawn of a new saeculum, the golden age of Roman peace, the Pax Romana. Suddenly, the prophecy wasn't about collapse, it was about imperial destiny. Augustus even staged the Ludi Seculares, the secular games, a once-in-an-era spectacle with sacrifices to underground gods and choruses of children singing hymns to the new order. The message was clear: Rome wasn't just surviving the turning of the cycle, it was bending time itself to its will. Yet cracks soon appeared. By the 3rd century, as Rome's borders frayed and emperors fell to assassins' blades, the old Etruscan warnings resurfaced. The philosopher Emperor Marcus Aurelius wrote of the shortness of life and the inevitability of decline, echoing the secula's fatalism. When the Visigoths sacked Rome in 410, many saw it as the prophecy fulfilled, the 10th saeculum crashing down just as the Etruscans foretold. But the idea refused to die. Medieval scholars adapted it into the concept of translatio imperii, the belief that empires rise and fall in ordained succession, while Renaissance thinkers like Machiavelli saw in the secula a warning about the cyclical nature of power. What makes this prophecy so enduring isn't just its accuracy, but its flexibility. The Etruscans framed time as a wheel, but it was the Romans who turned that wheel into a weapon, a narrative tool to justify empire, then later to explain its fall. Today, historians still debate whether the secula were genuine predictions or political theater, but perhaps the real prophecy lies deeper: the recognition that all civilizations, no matter how mighty, are bound by the same rhythms. Growth, arrogance, crisis, renewal. The pattern repeats whether we call it destiny or simply the weight of human nature. The Etruscans may have vanished, but their greatest warning lingers. No golden age lasts forever. The only question is what we build from the ashes. Centuries after Excalibur vanished beneath the lake and the mists of Avalon swallowed King Arthur's wounded form, a whisper began to weave through the tapestry of British lore: he will return. This wasn't just wishful thinking, it was prophecy carved into the bedrock of national identity. The earliest written account, Geoffrey of Monmouth's Historia Regum Britanniae from the 12th century, doesn't explicitly promise Arthur's resurrection. Instead, it leaves his fate hauntingly ambiguous. He was mortally wounded, yet he is carried off to the Isle of Avalon so his wounds might be attended to. But by the time Sir Thomas Malory penned Le Morte d'Arthur in the 15th century, the legend had crystallized into a vow: here lies Arthur, the once and future king. What transformed a fallen warrior into a messianic figure? The answer lies in the chaos of medieval Britain. The Arthurian prophecy surged during times of crisis: the Norman conquest, the Wars of the Roses, when people longed for a savior to reunite a fractured land. Welsh bards, clinging to Celtic resistance against Saxon invaders, sang of Y Mab Darogan, the son of prophecy, who would rise like Arthur to drive out the oppressors. Even the Glastonbury monks, who discovered Arthur's grave in 1191, a convenient political stunt to quell Welsh rebellions, couldn't suppress the myth's momentum. The tomb's inscription, "Here lies buried the famous King Arthur in the Isle of Avalon," only fueled speculation. If his body was here, where was his spirit? Modern adaptations have twisted the prophecy into kaleidoscopic new forms. T.H. White's The Once and Future King reimagined Arthur as a timeless moral compass, his return symbolic of humanity's capacity for renewal. John F. Kennedy's Camelot rhetoric and the musical it inspired framed the prophecy as a call to idealism. While films like Excalibur lean into the mystic horror of destiny, Arthur's return isn't a comfort but a warning. Even Monty Python's Holy Grail couldn't resist mocking the trope, with Arthur's botched resurrection proving some prophecies are better left unfulfilled. Yet the most fascinating iterations emerge from places Geoffrey of Monmouth never envisioned. In Japan's Fate anime series, Arthur is reincarnated as Artoria Pendragon, her return entangled with quantum mechanics. Marvel Comics merged the legend with superhero lore, suggesting Arthur was a mutant whose Excalibur could one day awaken mutants worldwide. These adaptations reveal a universal truth: the once and future king isn't just a person. He's an idea, a vessel for whatever a culture fears or craves. Beneath the layers of myth and marketing, the prophecy's power endures because it answers a primal question: what if our greatest heroes aren't gone, merely waiting? Whether Arthur slumbers beneath Edinburgh's Arthur's Seat or rides again in climate change allegories, his promise transcends time. The once and future king isn't coming back because of magic. He's coming back because we never stopped needing him. Balder the Beautiful, god of light and joy, was loved by all the realms, so loved that even the stones wept when his mother Frigg extracted oaths from every living thing to never harm him. Fire vowed not to burn him, iron swore not to pierce him, and mistletoe, young and tender, seemed too harmless to even ask. It was this oversight that Loki, the shape-shifting trickster, seized upon with serpentine cunning. The death of Balder wasn't just a tragedy, it was the first domino to fall in the Norse apocalypse, the unraveling that would lead the gods screaming toward Ragnarok. The prophecy began with Balder's own dreams, visions of his corpse sinking into Hel's icy grasp. When Odin, the All-Father, rode Sleipnir down to the underworld to consult a dead Ceres, her chilling confirmation echoed through the halls of Asgard: Balder's fate is sealed. What makes this moment so haunting isn't just the inevitability of death, but the gods' desperate attempts to cheat destiny. Frigg's oaths, the gods' celebratory game of hurling weapons at the seemingly invincible Balder, it all reeked of denial. Loki, ever the agent of chaos, didn't just kill Balder, he exposed the folly of trying to outwit fate. handing Hodder, Balder's blind brother, a dart of mistletoe to throw. Loki weaponized innocence itself. The moment the dart struck, the prophecy snapped taut like a bowstring. Balder's funeral pyre became a symbol of the god's fragility. His wife Nanna collapsed dead from grief, placed beside him on the ship Hringhorni. Thor blessed the pyre with his hammer, while Odin whispered secrets into Balder's ear, secrets so potent that some believe they were instructions for navigating the afterlife, a god's whispered rebellion against oblivion. Yet even in their mourning, the gods knew this was just the beginning. The real prophecy lay in the aftermath. Balder's death fractured the peace of Asgard. Loki's punishment, bound with his son's entrails under a dripping serpent's venom, only deepened the rift. The threads of kinship snapped, honor corroded, and the great winter Fimbulvetter began its advance. What's often overlooked is how human this prophecy feels. Balder's story isn't about divine might, it's about vulnerability. The gods, for all their power, couldn't protect what they loved most. When Hermod rode to Hel to bargain for Balder's return, even the underworld's offer came with a condition. Every living thing must weep for him. A single giantess, Thok, likely Loki in disguise, refused. The detail cuts deep. Salvation was possible, but it required unity, a lesson the gods failed to learn. Their inability to mourn together mirrored Midgard's petty divisions, a microcosm of the chaos that would consume them. Balder's death wasn't an end, but a catalyst. The wolves chasing the sun and moon grew closer, the roots of Yggdrasil trembled, and the monstrous children of Loki stirred in their chains. Some versions of the myth even hint at a post-Ragnarok hope, Balder and Hodder reconciled in a reborn world. But the real prophecy lingers in the silence after the pyre's last embers fade. No one, not even the gods, can outrun the consequences of broken bonds. The tragedy of Balder isn't that he died, it's that his death revealed how fragile order truly is, and how quickly light can vanish when trust turns to treachery. In the sacred groves of Isle Ife, where the earth itself is said to have begun, the Yoruba people trace their origins to a prophecy as old as time, the coming of Ojujuwa, the progenitor of kings, the bearer of divine order. According to the Odu Ifa, the sacred oral texts of Ifa divination, the world was once a watery void until the supreme god Olojumer sent Ojujuwa down from the heavens with a chain, a handful of earth, and a 5-toed chicken. His mission: to create land where there was only chaos. But this wasn't just a creation myth, it was a blueprint for kingship, a prophecy about the sacred bond between rulers and the cosmos that would echo through centuries of Yoruba history. The moment Ojujuwa's feet touched the marshy ground, he poured out the earth and let the chicken scatter it, forming the first dry land. This act wasn't merely symbolic, it encoded a profound truth about Yoruba sovereignty. Just as Ojujuwa brought order from disorder, every Oba king who descended from him would carry that same responsibility: to balance the earthly and divine, to sustain harmony where entropy lurked. The Ifa verses declare, "No king reigns without the Ashe of Ojujuwa," Ashe being the life force that flows through all things. To break this covenant wasn't just political treason, it was cosmic rebellion. The prophecy's weight became horrifically clear during the decline of the Oyo Empire centuries later. When kings like Aeol disregarded the sacred laws, ignoring the Ogboni Council's warnings, droughts crippled the land and enemies stormed the gates. Oral historians recount how Aeol, facing overthrow, cursed his own people before suicide, a violation so severe it was said to sever the Ashe linking Oyo to Ojujuwa's legacy. The empire collapsed shortly after, as if the land itself rejected their rule. Yet the prophecy wasn't just about punishment, it offered renewal. In the Iten Ife, stories tell of Ojujuwa's missing eye, lost not in battle, but willingly sacrificed to stabilize the fledgling earth. This detail mirrors later rituals where Yoruba kings offered symbolic sacrifices during coronation, acknowledging that true power requires surrender. Even today, the Uni of Ife, considered Ojuju, was direct descendant, undergoes rites where he's wrapped in a IA cloth, symbolizing his death to selfishness before rebirth as a sacred vessel. The brilliance of this prophecy lies in its adaptability. When the transatlantic slave trade scattered Yoruba people across the Americas, the prophecy traveled too. In Cuba, it resurfaced as Oduor in Santeria, where he became syncretized with Saint Lazarus, the patron of rebirth. In Brazil, Candomblé practitioners preserved the Odu verses, interpreting them as guides for resistance against colonial oppression. The prophecy's core remained unchanged. Leadership isn't inherited, it's earned through alignment with forces greater than any individual. Archaeologists digging at Ife have uncovered stunning terracotta and bronze heads, some dating back to the 12th century, depicting rulers with striated facial marks, the very scars said to have been passed down from Ojujuwa. These artifacts aren't just art, they're proof of how deeply the prophecy permeated Yoruba identity. To wear those marks was to carry the weight of the prophecy, to be both guardian and student of a destiny older than memory. Perhaps that's why Ojujuwa's prophecy endures. It doesn't just describe the past, it demands something of the present. Every time a Yoruba king dons the Ade crown with its beaded veil obscuring his face, he becomes anonymous, reminding onlookers that the office transcends the man. The prophecy was never about Ojujuwa alone. It was about the unbroken thread stretching from heaven to earth, insisting that those who rule must first remember how to serve. Long before Zeus hurled his first thunderbolt or Poseidon carved the seas with his trident, the world trembled under the rule of the Titans, ancient deities as vast as mountains and as relentless as time itself. Their reign was the first order of Greek cosmology, a primordial age where Uranus, the sky, pressed down upon Gaia, the earth, in a suffocating embrace. But Gaia, weary of this eternal oppression, whispered a prophecy to her Titan children that would unravel the cosmos. One of her own would rise to overthrow Uranus and usher in a new era. This was no mere prediction. It was the first domino in a divine chain reaction that would culminate in the Titanomachy, the greatest war the heavens had ever seen. The prophecy unfolded with brutal precision. Croesus, the youngest and most ruthless Titan, took Gaia's words to heart. Armed with a sickle forged from her very essence, he ambushed Uranus, castrating him and seizing power. But as the blood of the wounded sky god soaked into the earth, Gaia whispered another fateful warning to Croesus: "You too shall be overthrown by your own child." The Titan, now king of the cosmos, reacted with paranoid fury. Each time his sister wife Re bore him a child, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, he swallowed them whole, trapping them in his belly. It was a grotesque attempt to cheat destiny, a defiance that only tightened fate's grip. When Re gave birth to her sixth child, Zeus, she hid him in a Cretan cave, tricking Croesus with a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes. The stage was set. The prophecy, delayed but never broken, coiled around the generations like a serpent waiting to strike. Zeus grew in secret, nurtured by the goat Amalthea and the warrior Curetes, whose clashing shields drowned out his cries. Upon coming of age, he confronted his father, forcing him to disgorge his swallowed siblings, now fully grown and thirsting for vengeance. What followed was a war that shook the pillars of creation. The Titanomachy wasn't just a battle, it was a cosmic revolution. For 10 years, the Olympians and Titans clashed, their rage splitting continents and boiling seas. Zeus unleashed his thunderbolts, forged by the Cyclopes he freed from Tartarus. The Hecatoncheires, 100-handed giants, rained boulders like meteors upon the Titan stronghold of Mount Athres. Even the geography of the war became a testament to prophecy's power. When Zeus finally cast the defeated Titans into Tartarus, the depths of their prison were said to be as far below Earth as Earth is below heaven, a measurable, almost mathematical fulfillment of Gaia's vision of cyclical overthrow. Yet the prophecy's brilliance lay in its layers. The Titans weren't just villains, they represented the old order, the raw, untamed forces of nature. Their fall to the more nuanced Olympians mirrored humanity's own struggle to civilize the wild. Even the exceptions proved the rule. Some Titans, like Prometheus and Themis, allied with Zeus, suggesting that prophecy wasn't about annihilation but evolution. The Titanomachy didn't just change the gods, it redefined the universe, replacing chaos with a fragile, negotiable order where even the mighty Olympians knew their reign wasn't eternal. Perhaps that's why this prophecy endures. It's not just about gods and monsters, it's about the inevitability of change, the futility of resisting it, and the price of progress. Every revolution, every toppled dynasty, every scientific breakthrough that shatters old paradigms echoes the Titanomachy's thunder. The Greeks didn't just tell this story to explain their gods. They told it to remind themselves no rule lasts forever, and even the heavens must sometimes bleed for something new to be born. The Book of Revelation, the final chapter of the Christian Bible, doesn't just predict the end of the world, it paints it in technicolor horror and splendor, a cosmic opera where dragons clash with angels, seas turn to blood, and the very stars tumble from the sky. Written by John of Patmos, a visionary exiled to a rocky island in the 1st century, this apocalyptic text wasn't meant as a literal roadmap to destruction. It was a coded resistance manifesto, a survival guide for early Christians facing persecution under the Roman Empire's iron heel. Every beast, every trumpet blast, every sealed scroll was a symbol soaked in political urgency, designed to be deciphered by the faithful while flying under the radar of imperial censors. Take the infamous number of the beast 666. For centuries, this cryptic digits have been slapped onto popes, presidents, and barcodes, but its original target was far more specific. In ancient Greek and Hebrew, letters doubled as numbers, and scholars argue that 666 likely pointed to Emperor Nero, whose name in Aramaic adds up to that exact value. Nero, the tyrant who allegedly burned Rome and blamed Christians, then fed them to lions, embodied the Antichrist for John's audience, the mark on the forehead or hand. A dark mirror of Roman coinage stamped with Caesar's face, forcing believers to choose between economic survival and spiritual treason. Revelation wasn't forecasting distant doom, it was diagnosing the moral crisis of its moment. Yet the book's genius lies in its layered meanings. The seven-headed beast rising from the sea, for instance, wasn't just Nero. It represented any empire built on exploitation, any system that demands worship at the cost of conscience. The whore of Babylon, draped in purple and gold, drunk on the blood of saints, could symbolize imperial Rome, or any civilization that confuses wealth with righteousness. Even the four horsemen conquest, war, famine, and death transcend their medieval plague imagery. Their archetypes, eternal shadows that reappear in every era, the march of armies, the collapse of harvests, the slow suffocation of hope. The book's structure amplifies its urgency. 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 bowls, each cycle intensifies the stakes, a spiraling crescendo of divine reckoning. But woven through the chaos is a quieter thread, the lamb who was slain, a counterpoint to the dragon's roar. Revelation's central paradox is that victory comes through sacrifice, not conquest. The martyrs under the altar, crying, "How long?" aren't passive victims. Their faithfulness, even in death, becomes the catalyst for a new Jerusalem descending from heaven, a city where God will wipe every tear from their eyes. Modern obsession with Revelation often fixates on the fireworks, the battles, the plagues, the cryptic timelines, but early Christians focused on the subversive hope at its core, that the empires of this world, no matter how invincible they seem, are already living on borrowed time. When dictators rise or markets crash or pandemics rage, Revelation whispers the same question it posed 2,000 years ago: where does your loyalty truly lie? The apocalypse isn't just about endings, it's about unmasking the illusions of power and remembering that even in the darkest night, the dawn is promised. Before the first brick of Babylon was laid, before even the concept of kings existed, the Mesopotamians told a story so powerful it became their cosmic blueprint, the Enuma Elish, the creation epic where prophecy wasn't just about predicting the future, but about understanding the fragile balance holding reality itself together. Unlike modern doomsday forecasts, this wasn't a warning of what could happen, it was a declaration of what must happen, over and over, to keep chaos at bay. At its heart, the tale revolves around Marduk, the storm god who rises to battle Tiamat, the primordial goddess of the salty seas, whose body literally becomes the raw material of the universe once she's slain. But beneath the spectacle of gods clashing like thunderstorms, the Enuma Elish hides a deeper truth. Creation is never a one-time act. It's a daily struggle, a ritual that kings and priests must reenact to keep the world from sliding back into the abyss. Consider the eerie parallels between myth and politics. When Marduk defeats Tiamat, he doesn't just celebrate, he constructs Babylon as the cosmic anchor, the navel of the world where heaven and earth meet. The city's very layout mirrored the myth. Its ziggurats represented the mountains of the gods, its walls echoed the boundaries Marduk set against chaos. Every New Year's festival, the Akitu, wasn't just a party, it was a reenactment of Marduk's victory, a way to recharge the universe's order. Priests would recite the Enuma Elish while the king underwent a ritual humiliation, stripped of his crown and slapped by the high priest to remind him, and everyone watching, that even rulers were servants of this eternal balance. The prophecy here wasn't passive, it was performative. If the rituals faltered, so would the world. Yet the Enuma Elish also carries a dark, often overlooked warning. Chaos isn't just external. Tiamat doesn't start as a monster, she's a grieving mother, driven to rage when the younger gods kill her consort, Apsu. Her transformation into a serpentine force of destruction reflects a terrifying idea. Even the divine can tip into chaos when pushed too far. For Babylonians, this wasn't just theology, it was political allegory. When kings grew tyrannical, when priests hoarded power, they risked becoming the very chaos they claimed to fight. The epic's prophecy was clear: no empire, no matter how mighty, is immune to self-destruction. Archaeological proof of this belief lingers in artifacts like the Kuduru stones, boundary markers carved with symbols of gods and cosmic tears. These weren't mere decorations, they were physical embodiments of the Enuma Elish's order, placed on disputed land to say, this plot isn't just dirt, it's part of the divine design. Even Babylon's fall to Persia in 539 BC played into the narrative. Cyrus the Great didn't dismiss the Enuma Elish. He weaponized it, claiming Marduk had chosen him to depose the corrupt Nabonidus and restore balance. The prophecy, it seemed, could bend but never break. What makes the Enuma Elish timeless isn't its spectacle, but its psychology. It acknowledges a truth we still wrestle with: civilization isn't a given. It's a choice, a collective act of will against entropy. Every time a society builds a dam against floods, writes laws to curb violence, or even replants forests, we're replaying Marduk's battle not with clubs but with choices. The Babylonians knew what we often forget: prophecies aren't just about what's coming. They're about what we're willing to do to meet it. The firelight flickered low in the longhouse as the Viking Cirrus, the Völva, gripped her staff of ashwood carved with runes older than memory. Cloaked in a mantle of feathers and the pelts of black cats, she sat high on a platform draped in crimson cloth, a throne for one who walked between worlds. The air smelled of burnt herbs and wet earth as she began to chant, her voice cracking like ice on a winter lake. Those gathered, fjord-hardened warriors, shield maidens with battle-scarred hands, even skeptical merchants clutching amulets, leaned closer. This was no mere fortune-telling. The Völva's prophecies were threads pulled from the loom of the Norns themselves, and to hear them was to glimpse the warp and weft of fate. One of the most haunting examples comes from the Saga of the Greenlanders, where a Völva named Thorbjörg is summoned during a famine. The ritual is meticulous. She demands women who know the Vardløkker a sacred song to summon spirits and insists on eating the hearts of rare animals. When the chant begins, she trembles, her eyes rolling back as she describes ships arriving from Norway with supplies, but warns the settlement will wither within generations. The prediction is eerily precise. The Norse Greenland colonies did collapse, though whether from climate change, conflicts with the Inuit, or severed trade routes remains debated. What's chilling isn't just the accuracy, it's the way the prophecy shaped events. After Thorbjörg's vision, settlers altered their hunting patterns, hoarded resources differently, perhaps accelerating the very decline she foresaw. Yet the Völva's role wasn't just doomsaying. In the prophecy of the Völva Völuspá, the seeress recounts the entire history of the cosmos, from creation to Ragnarök and beyond. Her voice bridges mortal and divine, revealing secrets even Odin sacrificed an eye to learn. When she speaks of the golden age after the gods' fall, where fields unsown will ripen, it's not despair but paradox, a promise that destruction seeds renewal. This duality reflects the Viking worldview. Fate was fixed, but how one faced it defined their legacy. A Völva's words could steal a warrior's heart before battle or prepare a family for hardship, turning passive inevitability into active courage. Archaeology hints at how deeply these seeresses were revered. Graves across Scandinavia hold staffs like Thorbjörg's, buried with women whose bones show no labor scars, suggesting they were exempt from manual work. Some clutches of animal bones, raven claws, fox teeth match saga descriptions of Völva rituals. At Firkat in Denmark, a 10th century grave contained a woman seated on a wagon, a silver cup at her feet, her clothing embroidered with metallic threads that would have shimmered like the aurora. This was no outcast but a figure of awe, a living bridge to the divine. The Völva's power lay in her ambiguity. She wasn't just a mouthpiece for the gods, she negotiated with them. In Eirik the Red Saga, a seeress alters a prophecy mid-ritual when the spirits grow angry, offering extra sacrifices to appease them. This fluidity terrified and fascinated the Vikings. Unlike the Norns' immutable decrees, the Völva's visions were dialogues shaped by the questions asked, the gifts given, the courage of those who sought her. Perhaps that's why her legacy endures. In a world where we still crave certainty but know the future is mutable, the Völva reminds us, some truths aren't found in answers but in the act of daring to ask. In the ancient hymns of the Rigveda, where the fabric of Hindu cosmology was first woven, time moves not in a straight line but in an endless spiral of creation, preservation, and dissolution. This is the prophecy of Pralaya, the great dissolution where the universe, like a breath held too long, must exhale itself into nothingness before inhaling anew. Unlike Western apocalypses that promise final judgment or fiery end times, Pralaya is neither punishment nor finale. It is simply the turning of the wheel, the necessary reset that makes rebirth possible. The scale of this prophecy is staggering. Hindu scriptures describe 4 ages or yugas cycling from golden purity, Satya Yuga, to the bleak moral decay of Kali Yuga, our current era. Each full cycle lasts 4.32 million years, and 1,000 such cycles make one day of Brahma, the creator god. When that day ends, Pralaya arrives, not just as destruction but as absorption. All existence folds back into the divine source like waves collapsing into the ocean, waiting for the next dawn of creation. The Mahabharata paints it vividly. Mountains will crumble into dust, rivers evaporate like morning dew, and the very air will thicken until nothing moves but the breath of Vishnu, sleeping on the cosmic serpent in the void. Yet what makes Pralaya resonate today is its eerie ecological metaphor. The Bhagavata Purana warns of signs preceding dissolution. When kings become thieves, when cows, symbols of sustenance, are slaughtered without remorse, when the earth is mined until barren, then the world will convulse in its death throes. Replace kings with corrupt leaders and mining with deforestation, and the prophecy reads like a climate change report. The parallels are uncanny. Rising oceans mirror the mythic floods of Pralaya. Mass extinctions echo the absorption of species back into the cosmic whole. Even the prescribed solution aligns. Ancient texts emphasize dharma duty as the glue holding creation together. In modern terms, collective responsibility to rebalance our relationship with nature. The brilliance of Pralaya lies in its paradox, annihilation as an act of mercy. Unlike the Book of Revelation's wrath or Ragnarok's violence, this dissolution is a divine recycling. The Linga Purana compares it to a spider retracting its web. The same substance that built the universe is gently pulled back, unharmed, into the spinner. Contemporary Hindus see this as both warning and comfort. Industrialization may accelerate decay, but collapse is also an opportunity. After every pralaya, the next creation begins with inherent wisdom, carrying forward the lessons of past cycles. Perhaps the most radical thread is the prophecy's insistence on human agency. The Vishnu Purana states that pralaya can be delayed, though never fully avoided, through righteous living. Rituals like the Kumbh Mela, where millions bathe in the Ganges to cleanse collective karma, aren't just symbolic. They're active defiance against premature dissolution, a way to lengthen the breath of the current cycle. Environmentalists in India today frame reforestation and river cleanup as modern equivalents, arguing that ecological collapse isn't fate, it's the cumulative result of choices. Pralaya's ultimate lesson isn't fear but perspective. When the scriptures say, "All worlds are strung on time like pearls on a thread," they remind us that endings are prerequisites for renewal. In an age of melting glaciers and burning forests, this ancient prophecy offers a strange solace. The universe knows how to rebuild. The question is whether we'll be part of the rubble or the architects of what rises next. The Aztecs didn't just measure time, they lived inside its jaws. According to their cosmology, the universe wasn't a stable, eternal creation. It was a fragile thing, already destroyed and rebuilt 4 times over, each collapse more catastrophic than the last. They called these eras the 5 suns, and their own world the 5th and final age, hung by a thread over the abyss of oblivion. The prophecy wasn't a distant abstraction, it was etched into their temples, their rituals, even their wars. Every sunrise was a defiance of entropy, every drop of blood spilled in sacrifice a plea to keep the gears of existence turning just one more day. The first sun, Nahui Oslotl, ended in a cataclysm of jaguars, massive beasts that poured from the shadows to devour every human alive. The second sun, Nahui Ehekatl, was obliterated by hurricane winds so fierce they tore the very mountains apart. Then came the third sun, Nahui Quiahuatl, consumed by a rain of fire that melted stone into rivers of lava. The fourth sun, Nahui Atl, drowned beneath a flood so vast it swallowed the sky itself. Each of these ages was governed by a different god, a different element, and each collapsed when the cosmic balance tipped too far. But the fifth sun, Nahui Alan, form movement, was different. Born from the self-sacrifice of the gods at Teotihuacan, it was an age destined to end not by external force, but by earthquakes, a collapse from within. What makes this prophecy so gripping isn't just its violence, it's its precision. The Aztecs believed their sun, Tanatia, required a gruesome fuel, human blood. Without it, the celestial engine would stutter and fail, plunging the world into eternal night. This wasn't metaphor. Their Zumulpili ceremony, the new fire ritual performed every 52 years, was a desperate gamble to reset the cosmic clock. Priests would extinguish every flame in the empire, then carve open a sacrificial victim's chest on a mountaintop, using friction from his breastbone to spark a new fire. If the flames caught, cheers would erupt. The world had bought itself another half-century. If they didn't, darkness, chaos, the end of everything. But here's the twist. The fifth sun's demise wasn't just inevitable, it was cyclical. The Aztec calendar wasn't linear like ours. It was a wheel spinning through destruction and rebirth. Even their greatest city, Tenochtitlan, was built as a microcosm of this order, with its 4 quarters mirroring the 4 previous suns and its central temple, the Templo Maya, representing the axis of the current era. When Cortés arrived in 1519, many Aztec scholars saw eerie parallels: a pale stranger from the east, descending during a year the calendar marked as Sea-a-Cattle. One read, the same sign associated with the god Quetzalcoatl's prophesied return. Was this coincidence or fate unfolding? Modern archaeologists have uncovered chilling evidence of how deeply this prophecy gripped the Aztec psyche. Excavations at the Templo Maya reveal layer upon layer of sacrificial offerings, jade, shells, and the bones of children, each burial a plea to stave off collapse. Yet the prophecy also carried a strange comfort. If the world ended, it wouldn't be the first time, and if the gods had rebuilt before, they could rebuild again. This duality, terror and resilience, echoes in today's climate crises and pandemics. The Aztecs understood something we're only now relearning. Civilizations flourish not by denying their fragility, but by ritualizing it, turning fear into a covenant with the future. Perhaps that's why their last prophecy endures. The fifth sun's lesson wasn't about resignation, it was about responsibility. Every act of preservation, from planting crops to raising children, was a defiance of the void. The Aztecs didn't just await the end, they fought for each dawn, knowing that even the most fragile light is worth the fight. From the trembling halls of Delphi to the blood-stained temples of Tenochtitlan, these 35 sagas reveal a truth as old as humanity itself. We are a species haunted by the future. Every civilization, whether carving runes into stone or whispering prayers to the stars, has wrestled with the same burning questions: what awaits us? Can we change it? And if the end is coming, how do we face it with courage? The oracle's riddles, the Mayan calendar's precision, Ragnarok's cyclical wrath, these aren't just stories. They're mirrors reflecting our deepest fears and wildest hopes. Take a step back and the patterns emerge like constellations. Some prophecies, like the Norse Norn's unbreakable threads, insisted fate was fixed. Others, like the Hopi's 2 roads, offered a choice, a chance to pivot before the storm. The Aztecs fought their apocalypse with ritual and sacrifice, while the I Ching's hexagrams taught emperors to bend with change rather than resist it. Yet beneath these differences thrived a shared conviction. The future isn't just something that happens to us. It's a dialogue, a dance between the divine and the mortal, between the stories we inherit and the choices we make. What's striking isn't just how many of these prophecies came true, but how they shaped history along the way. Croesus marched to his doom believing the oracle's words guaranteed victory. Cortés exploited the Aztecs' messianic expectations to topple an empire. Even today, politicians and activists invoke prophetic language, climate deadlines, technological singularities, the arcs of justice, proof that these ancient frameworks still mold our modern psyche. The prophecies live on because they're more than predictions. They're tools for survival, lenses to interpret chaos, and sometimes warnings we ignore at our peril. But here's the real magic. These sagas aren't relics, they're invitations. When Merlin's visions of Camelot's fall remind us that even the brightest kingdoms cast shadows, or when the Sampo's fragments whisper that destruction can scatter new seeds, they're asking us to engage. To question, to find our own place in the tapestry. So tell us which of these prophecies lingers in your mind. Is it the Völva's haunting chants or Kalki's fiery sword promising renewal? Drop your favorites in the comments, or better yet, hit subscribe. Because the past isn't done speaking, and every myth we unravel reveals another thread in the grand, unfinished story.